For the last 30 days, for all of July, I've been posting every day. And the way I've been able to do that was just with the process that I edit these reels so that it can take that workload off of me and I completely hand it off to Claude. So what Claude can do is, of course, edit the ums, uhs, and pauses out of my videos. It can reframe it so that it can push in, it can zoom out, it can punch in, it can do the cuts. It can add captions, it can add motion graphics, it can search Google and find images of the articles that I'm talking about or any other assets that I need in order for the video to have visual graphics. And so I'm going to go through step by step how I build out this whole automation in the system so that when you start making your short form videos in particular, you can start editing your videos faster. So all it looks like for me is that I take out my SD card, I move my video footage from the SD card to my desktop. I give it to Claude. I say, hey, go ahead and edit this. And then in 10, 15 minutes, I come back to a finished video that it can go ahead and post on my behalf as well. So let's jump into it. So the first thing is, even though I have this reel editing system, I was still afraid to post. And the fear that I have is always just because I'm so critical of myself and the way that I show up online that it ends up freezing me at different points in my editing process. So, for example, after I film the footage, I watch it back just to make sure that the messaging is tight and everything is clear and is understandable. But when I'm watching it back, I'm like, I didn't really see this part right. I didn't really understand how I was coming off on camera. I didn't like it. Then I'd put it in the editing software. And once I edit it, it's like, I don't really like the way I look. Once I edit it, I didn't say this right. I want to cut out certain parts. And so there's friction. Then once I finally edit it, I have to go post it. And so once I open up Instagram and I see other reels that are better than mine, I go, I don't really want to post it either. I'm just going to keep it somewhere else and maybe I'll post it later. Or I'll get sidetracked and just completely forget to post it at all. And so what I'd hope with this process was so that I stop those points of friction where I no longer want to put out the video or I get sidetracked. And with the less friction points possible, the easier it becomes to put the video out there altogether. Every video has always been just a series of small decisions. And it starts with, how do I get Claude to see the video in what we determine as seeing, but like Claude can only look at observable traits of a video. And so Claude can look at frame by frame. Claude can understand facial expressions. Claude can understand facial positioning. What is a good punch in? What should when I punch in a video, how do I know that it's still in the right frame? Where's the middle of the screen? And so Claude can understand that positioning so that it makes the edits correctly in the way that I'd want to edit it if I were doing it myself. When you go to a restaurant to get food, the menu isn't just made at the time you sit down. The menu's already been predetermined. All the things that they want to offer is already in place, and all your settings, all the things that they have set is already predetermined before you show up. And the same thing with this editing reel, all of the work goes up front. And then once you do that work, then every reel afterwards becomes significantly easier. And so the hardest part is always the beginning, teaching the skill, going back and forth and reiterating so that it really gets it dialed into the way that you want to do it. And so in the same case, you have to put in some of the work up front to let it understand what kind of video needs to be edited. And so I kind of place it into two different things. And so the objective measurements and then the things that you judge as far as taste and quality. So the first step is always going to be FFmpeg. And so in order for Claude to read the footage, see the timestamps and all the different aspects of the video itself, FFmpeg is pretty much the program behind Final Cut, behind CapCut, behind all the linear editing programs that allows them to see the footage in that sense and run the different parts inside the timeline. And so once you install that onto your computer, it's really just a bunch of code. And then Claude can then instead use that to help manipulate the footage. So Claude can cut out a piece and Claude can rearrange pieces. You can just pretty much tell Claude what to do as far as the video goes, and then it can manipulate the video on your behalf. So when I normally would have to take the raw footage, put it into Final Cut Pro, then instead Claude can take that same raw footage and do the same thing as far as manipulation to the video. And so a couple of things with FFmpeg is that you want it, the speed of your CPU will determine how fast Claude can edit videos. So recently I bought me a $3,000 MacBook so that I can have, you know, the M5 Pro chip and all the other fun stuff. But the biggest thing was just so that the computing power needed to edit these videos quickly was going to be a bottleneck for my previous M1 Mac, which it did work and it did get it done in like 30 minutes. But like the better and more videos that I want to put out, the better my computer needed to be in order to handle that. So after you cut out the dead air and you transcribe the words and stuff like that, the Whisper was the next program tool that was necessary in order for Claude to understand what I was saying inside the video. So it can observe my face and it can then use Whisper to transcribe everything that I'm saying. And so with that, I was able to then have it give me a transcript of the video. And as it reads the transcript, it can determine the intent of the message for that video. And so instead of me having to explain where I want it to cut, I have two options. I can let Claude determine what makes the most sense, where I start to drift and where I start to ramble, and make the cuts on its own. Or if I have a script and I'm kind of going off the script and I veer a little bit, if it makes sense and it's additional helpful information, Claude will leave that in. But if I start to completely go off topic, it'll just cut that part out and it will follow the script as best as possible. It works really well in short form if you're doing a storytelling kind of skit where you kind of have different pieces of footage in different areas, whether it's just different locations or different angles. If you keep that script the same, it'll know which areas of the video to cut. And so a lot of times, if you just do some pre-planning before you do your adventurous short form content, then Claude can stay on track because of it has a script to go off of for any reference information. It can make sure that you have a very tight, very polished video format to start working with. So alongside of Whisper, I had to download a face kind of recognition thing because one of the issues I then started to run into was that I want to reframe it. So when I make a cut, I don't always want it to be jagged and it just looks like I change frames. Instead, I'd rather it punch in or do a J cut so that it can make that transition look intentional and smoother. And so the issue I was running into was that it would cut in, but it would cut in like a diagonal of my face, or it wouldn't cut in with me being dead center. Or if it were to then put on-screen text, it would put it over my face. And so that was because even though it could see the footage, it didn't have what it needed to identify me as the person or where my face was. So I have InsightFace, and that is the face recognition engine that runs locally on my computer and can determine what's in the frame and then keep me in center frame based on one of those social media guides that says like the no zones where, you know, the comments are on this side and the little captions are at the bottom. And so I always wanted to put the captions close to my chin. And so it can do that because it now knows where my face is with the face recognition and can continue to make that part easy. All right. So then after you reframe, after you have that part of the video, you can teach Claude to color grade. And so what happens is in my workflow, I tried it two different ways. I tried having it so that my office setup is uniform. Every time I film it the same way with the same colors and settings on my lights, and then I can film it in log. And if I film it that way so that it's really gray and stuff like that, I can give Claude my LUTs and it can apply that LUT to my footage so that I don't have to spend that time color graded if I shot it correctly. Now, if I'm doing experiments with different angles or different lighting scenarios and stuff, then I have to manually make those changes. I haven't taught it to adjust in the way that I like to my taste, But at the very least, if it's going to be the same setting in the same place, I can now just shoot log video and Claude will grade it for me. Alternatively, if I don't want to shoot it in log and I just want to shoot it in Rec 709, I shoot on a Sony FX2. And so I use the S-Cinetone setting, and it can just do that. It can add like a slight S curve, add me some contrast, and really tighten up the footage without having to do too much, as long as I kind of tell it to dial in that setting as if I want that as a standard. And so, especially if you're starting out and you're just building it out, get adventurous, but keep the same settings and the standards so that if you have a very repeatable workflow, Claude can go ahead and take care of that for you. Now, additionally, the design portion of the short form reels, because I like captions, I like motion graphics, but as you already know, Claude has its own defaults. And so it may default to do some, like it has those eyebrows and the Claude looking graphics and motion and stuff like that. And I'm going to eventually learn how to change its default design so it looks more like me. But for the time being, at the very least, it's editing. And so it'll do motion graphics. It'll use hyper, because once it reads the script from Whisper and it has your transcript, FFmpeg gives it the times when you say that. So whereas we see that it takes 10 seconds for us to say the sentence, Claude will be able to say that from second 10.1 to 10.3, he said the word "the." And so it has all those timestamps for every word and can at least put the motion graphic on top of that word when you say it. And it gets even better because once you have the facial recognition, it makes sure that either it's a full screen graphic or the graphic doesn't cover your face. And so now you get to get past all those kind of annoying parts where, all right, it has on-screen text, but it's covering my mouth. And it's like, come on, bro, like my face is right there. What's wrong with you? And so, but you can get through that. Then the next step is the audio. And if you don't already have a good mic or you're recording somewhere where the audio isn't good, it can clean up your audio. What it can do is Adobe Podcasts, I used to use a lot for if I have challenging audio to work with. And it does a pass of course, balancing the loudness. It adds some compression to it so that the loud and the soft parts of your video is more uniform. And then there's this AI voice enhancer that if your words are kind of garbled or it really can't make out what it is you're saying, it'll use like an AI version of your voice to help bring out those incoherent parts. And with that, it can kind of remake a version of your voice for all the parts that are really hard to detect. And so Claude can do a similar thing when you download those skills from GitHub and stuff like that and help to clean up your audio. And with that, you have the framing and the positioning, you have the captions, you have motion graphics, you have audio, and then you can also give it a music track. You get some royalty-free music and give it to Claude, and Claude will be able to keyframe it so that when you're not talking, it can raise the volume of that song. And then when you are talking, it can lower it back. So say, for example, if you just have some on-screen text without you talking and you have music, it'll turn that music up and then turn it back down when you start talking again. And so that whole workflow makes it so much easier to just add music because it'll know based on what the loudness settings for the video should be. It will cater that music and you're talking. And then the last bit is sound effects, in which if you know when you're editing and you add a motion graphic, if it pops up on the screen, sometimes you want to pop. Or if it swooshes in, you add a whoosh kind of noise. If you're building up tension, you can add a riser and stuff. And one of the biggest things I was dealing with was just, I don't have time to really sound design stuff. Instead, I'd rather just, get it going because I'm putting out so many reels. I'm not going to sound design everything. But Claude can take that time. And if you tell it what it is that you want to create, you can make sound design a part of the workflow. So every time I want you to punch in, give me a whoosh. And like one of the videos I had before, when I said I was like, I'm a doctor and stuff like that, it had those kind of whooshes every time it punched in or zoomed in really fast. And it had that like comedic effect to it. And it worked. It does the same thing for motion graphics. So if you have icons, and you have like say for example the fire emoji, it has a fire sound effect and pairs it so that when the fire emoji shows up on screen, you hear the little cackle of a fire. And anytime that you want like a card to come in, it adds a whoosh. If you move it or any type of texting or stuff like that, you can add the appropriate sound effects. And if you have a robust sound effect library, Claude can just pull from that. And because normally in when you get a sound effect pack, the sounds are named. And so Claude can read the names, apply the appropriate sound effect at the appropriate time in the video, and then bam, now you have sound design already. And so it makes it so much better to just keep these reels flowing and consistent when most of your workflow is already handled by Claude. And so the last step is that in the chat, it'll show you, hey, I did this video. Are there any other changes you want to make? And then you can just say no, and then you're good to go. You can take that video, you can post it directly. Or for me, I use another software called Zernio, and I'm able to then take that video and I can post it through Zernio from Claude. So I don't have to physically open up Instagram and post it that way. So for the last 30 days, all of my posts that I've done on my pages have been through either Zernio or I use make.com and use those modules to paste to Facebook directly, LinkedIn, and some other platforms. And so with that, I'm able to then completely offload the posting and the creation of the reels. I can now just focus on the filming and the ideas, seeing what works, and then building my workflow around it. And so with that, it makes it super simple to keep creating more content. Now, the next step is what types of content can Claude really edit? And so I tried doing a skit before where I'm doing different scenes and different angles and I have different positioning. And it started to fail with the grading, the colors, understanding where it went. And unless you had a script ahead of time, it wouldn't cut the same, it wouldn't cut all the pieces where I had it in my mind for it to go. It's not going to just follow it cohesively. You kind of need to give it some more backbone. Unless you do a lot of skits and you have a repeatable format for that, then you can teach it to skits. If you are doing some type of a montage kind of thing where it's not really you talking on video, but just like a series of images or a series of video clips and you need some on-screen text, it'll take care of that for you. And so it'll put the music. I had to teach it to edit on beat because by default, Claude, as a musician, you know that when you hear a song, you clap on the 2 and the 4. And so Claude was editing the beat on like the 1 and the 3 of the song. So when you count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll edit on the 1 and the 3 of the music instead of the 2 and the 4, which made the edit feel as though it wasn't right. And so once I told it how to identify where the 2nd and the 4th beat of the song was, now it starts editing on beat. And I'm like, okay, cool. So with those, I was able to start really tightening up my workflow for reels and stuff. And so then I turned all of that into a skill so that ideally, if someone else were able to download, use Claude, I give it my skill and it goes through all the things, all the trials and errors that I did and kind of all the memories that it went through to make it work for me. So then the last thing you'd have to do is tweak it for your workflow so that it learns your pace, your cadence for talking, your pacing, and the way that you articulate or how you want, motion graphics, your colors, all the things that you need in order for it to make reels in the way that you'd like it to do. And the hardest part of the whole process was just being able to go back and forth and saying, okay, this isn't correct. What's incorrect about it? How do I want you to fix it? And how do you make sure that this mistake doesn't happen anymore? And so once it patches all those mistakes, it becomes a very straightforward process in how it's able to deliver reels edited. So there's 3 things that this whole process really can eliminate. If you don't have time, for me, I wake up around 7:30, 8 a.m. and I go down to the office, I set up my camera and I could just go, bam, hey, if you want your reels edited, you don't have to hire someone overseas. You can just get your Claude subscription, teach Claude how to edit and make your videos. So then once I do that, I give it to Claude, I go upstairs, eat breakfast, I do whatever, I take a walk around my neighborhood, and then I come back and I have a finished reel. right? And so now when you say that I'm not a content person, I'm not somebody who really records content like that, it doesn't take that much time. You don't have to be a content person. You don't have to come up with skits or dance on camera. As long as you have a message and you can articulate it, you can make reels. And even if you talk slow, you can tell Claude to speed it up. Because sometimes for short form, if you talk really slow like this, Claude can speed it up for you so that you sound like a little more faster and it's a lot easier to listen to. I mean, those two steps alone are enough to get you further ahead to start posting. And once you get into the cadence of posting and how much easier it is to do it now, then you can start increasing the volume. Because if you ever seen people who say, yeah, just post 10 to 20 times a day, and you're like, well, how am I about to do that? Because it already takes me like 2, 3 hours to create a reel. With this workflow for me, now I can just go ahead and talk and I'll have all the reels I need in order to post that many times per day. And I usually kind of have the longer end of short form content where mine is like a minute 30 seconds. So I could then cut it up into 10, 15-second blurbs and post those all the time. And then I can post them on every platform. And I can post different videos per platform based on what I think would work best for them. And so all of July was just a big experiment to see what kind of videos were working. And with that, I was able to start really building up a workflow, building up the muscle of showing up on camera all the time so that I can articulate my ideas, I can say them succinctly, and then I have a workflow that helps me to promote them. And I don't have to be stuck on any particular part that is uncomfortable for me, which has always been the editing and the publishing. And so with that, I hope that this at least will give you some insight as to what's possible when it comes to creating your reels. Of course, I'm always working on the scripting and the reel, and I'm going to keep publishing my results and the things that I discover as I keep posting these content reels that I've created with Claude. And if you want to get either one-on-one help with just figuring out how to implement it for yourself, if you have any technical questions or issues around creating content and reels and stuff like that, just reach out to me. Everything I can talk to you inside the group. And so download the skill, see how it works for you, and improve your workflow when it comes to creating reels. That way, you no longer have to be stuck on the hard parts around editing and posting. Just have Claude handle that.